Mais comment ça va, chef? It's Chef Harley Fontenot again with another episode of the Bon Ton Cooking Show. Now we got something special lined up for y'all this time. We got some steak in the gravy. We got some bell peppers, some onions, some garlic, some of that all. And we got some kitchen bouquet. Boy, I lie, you throw that in the trash. Now we got some purple hull peas, some tasso and sausage, and some beef and some chicken stock, and of course rice. Now let's get started cutting them vegetables. Now that I pie out come inside them vegetables, y'all like that, huh? Now, see what we got here is some bottom round steak. And that's cheap, but Pa Rad knows that y'all ain't got a lot of money. So what I'm trying to do is make it to where anybody can cook that. Now, let's cut this. All right, now that you chopped up your little meat, it's time to season that. So we're gonna start with that bold tones and put a good bit of that. Because you gotta remember, it might look like a whole lot of seasoning, but that's gotta flavor the whole gravy. Then put even more of the onion powder. Make that come out real fast. And your garlic powder. And a dash of that cayenne pepper. Now set that little ass on fire, T. Now you mix all that up, and you see how red your meat is, because that's what you go by. But when you're getting used to this, whenever you eyeballing stuff, like a true Cajun, you want to take your time and don't put too much at one time. Once you put it in there, you can't take it out. So start it a little bit at a time and add it till it's red. And you want to make sure all the meat's all coated with seasoning. Each little piece is just coated with seasoning. So now that that's going on, we're going to put a little bit of oil in that pot to brown our vegetables and our meat, and we're going to get it hot. So the oil I like to use for this is canola oil. And the reason for that is because it has a high smoke point. You don't want to use that vegetable oil and have that flash up and burn them little fingers. So what we're going to do is going to put enough to cover the bottom of the pot. What you got to do is have your pot at a high heat, because you want it to get hot. And to test to make sure it's ready to put your stuff in there, which is if you stick an onion in there and it starts sizzling and crackling. So which it's doing right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and add this. See, there's many ways to skin a cat, and in South Louisiana there's even more ways to cook a rice and gravy. But if you're not scratching a black iron pot to get that good, dark, thick, flavorful gravy, I don't want to come eat at your house. Cook that till it gets clear. But like Justin Wilson used to say, it's not clear enough to read the newspaper through it, but you'll see what I'm talking about. It'll get a little clear. You get some brown tips on it. Start smelling up the whole house. And you just take your time. All right, now once you stir this, you'll start seeing the onions are starting to turn clear, and you get some little brown tips on them. That's when you want to add your meat, which I got right here. Now look close at that. Look how seasoned that is. We don't eat nothing bland around here in Cajun country. So you just add that in there. Once you got that stirred up, what you're gonna do is just let that brown. Let it burn a little bit. All right, while we're browning our meat, what we're gonna do is get our peas ready. So you're gonna want to cut some onions, some garlic, and your sausage and tasso, just to be ready for whenever we're gonna drop that in a couple minutes. So split that, peel that, chop that up, show it to your mama. Now when you do your garlic, you gotta smack that like Akon does when he's on the floor, and like I do when I'm at the Crawfish Festival or the Crackling Festival. Now we're gonna chop up the tasso into some little small chunks. And by the way, this whole time, don't worry about that gravy. It's gonna do its own thing. It's gotta really brown good, so it's almost better even if you forget about it at first. Just go ahead and cut all your stuff, your tasso, and then next I'm gonna do my sausage. Now we're gonna go check on that gravy, and we're gonna start these two things, the sausage and tasso, onions and garlic, for our purple hull peas. After a while, after us doing that, what's going on is it's starting to stick a little bit, and it's forming its own juice. Now right here, a lot of people just add their water right now and just boil the meat, but let me tell you something, that's not Cajun. So we're gonna stir it around a little bit just to make sure the top gets brown just like the bottom. And we're gonna just wait and let that burn a little bit more. And we're gonna move over to the other pot and do our vegetables. Now once your pot for your beans get hot, just dump your vegetables in there and let it roll. Do the same thing like always. When you cook Cajun stuff, you almost always do that. You put your bell peppers, onions, and garlic, and you cook it down. There's just almost anything is gonna have that in it. And you're gonna drizzle your sausage and tasso down in there. So I like my beans with a bunch of big chunks of meat in it. Makes it taste better. Gives it a smoky flavor and gives it more substance. Y'all gonna see. Now while we was getting that ready, I started to smell my pot. And if you don't know what that means, you will if you start doing all my recipes, because look at that. I don't know if you got a good shot of that, but all that stuff is sticking, making a bunch of gramis to the bottom of that pot. So from here, what we're gonna do, we're gonna add in a little bit of water. About a ½ inch at the bottom of the pot. And you scratch the crap out of that. Just keep on scratching it. And the more you scratch it, the thicker and the darker that gravy is gonna be. Now you gotta really be careful not to put too much water though, because this is the most crucial part of cooking a good rice and gravy, is whenever you add a little bit of water, scratch, and make the initial paste that's gonna flavor the entire gravy. You add too much water, and at that point you're just boiling it. And you don't wanna do that, trust me. You'll lose all kinds of goodness. And don't forget, this whole time now, you're cooking them vegetables for them beans, so you gotta come back around to that. And stir it up. And now you wait a little while. All right, now that we waited a little while, what's going on is our onions got a little bit of a brown tip to it, and it's getting clear. We even got some gramis working at the bottom of the pot. But hold on to your little ass, T-boy, because I got some butter in my pocket. And the reason I did that because I forgot to let that soften this morning. And my pocket is hot. So now what we're gonna do is turn the fire low. And the reason you wanna turn your pot low is because if you cook butter at a high heat, it'll start scorching and burning. And that's not Cajun either. So what we're gonna do is use your hot spoon and cut through that. Maybe it wasn't in Power Ant's pocket long enough. That's why it's not cutting as easy as it should. That's just to help it along though. You don't even have to cut it. Mix all that up real good. And we're gonna come back to that gravy real quick because I think it's time to add some water. See right here? See, it formed that paste and it's stuck again. And that's what you want. You're gonna continuously just keep on sticking that. And you use your Tiger's cup, your Crackling Festival cup, whatever you got. And this time you're gonna put 1 inch of water instead of 1/2 inch. And it's gonna do the same thing as before, but with a bigger quantity. It's gonna make more gravy, just as thick as it was in the beginning. And as you're gonna see, we're just gonna keep doing that the whole time. But each time you add another 1/2 inch of water to what you had before. And you scratch and mix all that up. Now that that butter's starting to melt in this pot right here, we're gonna show you what to do next. So what I got right here is some purple hull peas, and it's the fresh one that's frozen and not the one in the can. So you're gonna add that in there, and you give that a good mix. And after you do that, I'm gonna show you a little trick I learned in the restaurants. You take beef broth and chicken broth, and when you mix that comme ça, you know what that means? It makes pork broth. Does the same flavor. So for our liquid, instead of using just water, we're gonna do that. You mix that up, and it looks like a lot of liquid, but it's gonna cook down and get soft, soft, soft. And with beans, you wanna cook that a long time. You gotta cook the fat out of them, because you don't want no more stanking up the dinner table. So now what you're gonna do right here is add some seasoning. You go a little light on that, because you put that broth in there, and it's gonna make it too salty if you put too much. So just start out with a little bit at a time. See, I'm real used to this, so I know that's what I need, but you start a little bit at a time and taste as you go. We're gonna put some cayenne pepper in there. I like to set that little ass on fire from time to time. Your onion powder. And your garlic powder. Then you give that a good mix. And you turn your heat up a little bit to about medium, just to help things along a little bit. But see, I'm starting to smell it again now. We're gonna come back to this steak in the gravy and stir it and do the same thing like we did before. Now this time, put about 1.5 inches of water and do the same old thing. So we waited long enough to where now the meat has cooked down and that paste is stuck again to the bottom of the pot. Now the more times you do that, the better it's gonna taste. So now what we're gonna do is add another 1/2 inch to what we had before and stir that. And make sure you scratch it, because it's going to end up thick like that. Ooh. So this is the easy part right here, because once you got your beans rolling and stuff at a good steady pace where they're not going to stick, and you got your gravy, you got a good bit of gravy, and it's getting thick, what you're going to do is turn that kind of low, between medium and low. And it's gonna simmer, and it's gonna cook down and get that meat real, real tender. Even if it's round steak, something that's tough, you cook that and it's gonna get real tender. And now this is a perfect time for you to go sit back, throw on the Saints game, drink you a cold one or two, and tell some Boudreaux and Thibodeau jokes. All right, so Boudreaux and Thibodeau was out fishing one day. Thibodeau pulls out this big old giant lighter, lights his cigarette, puts it back in his pocket. Boudreaux said, "Man, where you got that lighter at? That thing's big, big." He said, "Man, I found out if you take a nickel, throw it in the bayou, then a big old genie pops out and grants you whatever wish you want." He said, "Really?" So he dug in his own pocket, pulled out a nickel, threw it in there, and sure enough, here comes the big genie. He said, "May what y'all want." He said, "Man, I always wanted to be rich, so let me get $1 million." He said, "I got you, T." And he went back down into the water. So next thing you know, the whole bayou just fills up with nothing but the ducks. He said, "Man," he said, "I don't know what's wrong with that genie. I know I asked him for $1 million, not ducks." He said, "I know." He said, "I didn't ask him for a big either." All right, so even though we had this on a low heat, you see what happened was it started to cook down and formed another little paste. And that's perfect. Like I said, the more that happens, the better the flavor is gonna be. So now what we're gonna do is just add some more water so we have enough gravy to cover the meat. See how it's barely peeking over the fence like that? That's how you want it. And you stir it up again just like before. Scratch all that together. Give it a good old mix and leave that alone. Now this whole time, don't forget, you got these beans cooking, and every now and then you want to give them a good little stir. just to make sure nothing wants to stick and burn to the bottom, because that's not good. You see how that's starting to get real thick? It started out with all that stock, but look, it's almost like a paste that's happening. So we're gonna let that cook a little while longer, and I'm gonna show y'all, you're gonna have to start mashing it. See, that's the trick. If you want your beans to be real creamy, what you're gonna do is mash that up against the side of the pot. Once they soft, and you mix it in, and it makes it to where it bonds real good together with that paste that's already in there. You want to be able to use a rice scoop and scoop your beans and put it on there. You see what I mean, T? You mash that up against the side of the pot, come soft. And when you mix it, it's gonna come out to the consistency like that. Not quite like refried beans, but almost. When it gets thicker than this, you're gonna know it's ready. So you cook the fat out them beans, and we're gonna let this cook on a real low heat and get some more flavor. And whenever it passes the spoon test that I'm gonna share on a little while, then it'll be ready to mange. Man, look how now that we let that cook down, look at that, boy. Look how thick that is. That's thick, thick, thick. And that's how you want it. So you go ahead and turn that fire off on that. And for this, that's pretty much ready. You got your thick gravy. It's dark, it's flavorful. Make sure you taste it, make sure it's to your liking, because if you want to add more seasoning, you can. Because until you get used to it, like I said, you want to add a little bit at first, because once you put it in, you can't take it out. So what we're doing now is waiting to be able to pass the spoon test. Now, I'm going to just show you all outside the pot what I mean by the spoon test. You see, you got your piece of meat right there. What you want is to be able to cut right through that with a spoon. So that's tender, tender, tender. Now, of course, I gotta taste that meat. Now, hold on to your little lasty, boy, because it's time to mange. Thank you all for watching another episode of the Bon Ton Cooking Show. Join us next time whenever we're making some chicken sauce pecan ball. That's gonna be good. Until then, Power Ant loves you.